Abstract, this article examines the role of management quality as institutional infrastructure in higher education, drawing on recent longitudinal evidence linking manager performance to employee salary progression, internal mobility, and retention. While colleges and universities invest heavily in student success initiatives and financial planning, people management is often treated as an assumed competency rather than a cultivated strategic capability. The evidence suggests this assumption carries significant costs. Over multiple years, employees reporting to high performing managers experience measurably faster advancement and broader institutional mobility than peers led by weaker managers. Differences that compound over time and directly affect institutional capacity to execute strategic priorities. This article synthesizes research from organizational behavior, human capital development, and higher education administration to propose evidence based interventions institutions can implement to strengthen management quality, including structured development pathways, transparent performance ecosystems, and distributed leadership models that treat management capability as strategic infrastructure rather than administrative over. Higher education institutions operate in an environment of persistent constraint. Enrollment volatility, demographic headwinds, political scrutiny, and mission creep have become defining features of the landscape. Carlson, 2022. Yet amid these external pressures, one factor remains almost entirely within institutional control: the quality of people management. Recent longitudinal research demonstrates that manager performance creates measurable differences in employee outcomes, salary progression, internal mobility, and retention that compound significantly over time. Hoffman et al., 2022. Employees led by high-performing managers advance faster, move more fluidly across organizational boundaries, and remain with their institutions longer than peers reporting to weaker managers. For higher education, this evidence carries particular weight. The sector is characterized by compressed advancement timelines, limited hierarchical depth, and a persistent move out to move up dynamic that drains institutional knowledge and leadership capacity. Bitchell, 2023. Small and mid-sized colleges, where cross-functional agility and deep institutional fluency are essential for survival, face especially acute risks when management quality is weak. Despite these stakes, many institutions treat management as an assumed competency, something that emerges organically from subject matter expertise or tenure rather than a capability requiring intentional development and continuous investment. This article argues that management quality functions as hidden infrastructure. When it is weak, even well-designed strategies stall. When it is strong, execution accelerates and organizational learning compounds. The sections that follow define what constitutes management quality in the higher education context, examine the organizational and individual consequences of variation in manager performance, synthesize evidence-based interventions institutions can implement to strengthen leadership capability, and propose forward-looking frameworks for embedding management development into institutional strategy. The management quality landscape in higher education. Defining management quality in post-secondary contexts. Management quality is not a unitary construct, but a composite of behaviors, capabilities, and structural conditions that enable employees to perform, develop, and advance. In organizational research, high-performing managers typically demonstrate four core capabilities: task-focused leadership, clear goal setting, resource allocation, and accountability structures; people-focused leadership, coaching, feedback, and psychological safety; strategic alignment, connecting day-to-day work to broader institutional priorities; and development orientation, actively creating pathways for skill building and career progression. Gottfredson and Aguines. 2017. In higher education, these capabilities intersect with sector-specific challenges. Managers in post-secondary settings often lead teams with highly specialized expertise: information technology professionals, student affairs practitioners, advancement officers, academic program coordinators, while themselves lacking formal management training. Rosser, 2004. The promotion pipeline in higher education frequently rewards technical or scholarly excellence rather than leadership competency, creating what organizational scholars call the expertise authority gap. Individuals assume managerial roles because of what they know rather than their demonstrated ability to develop others. Gigliotti and Rubin, 2017. This dynamic is particularly pronounced in academic affairs, where faculty who transition into department chair or program director roles receive minimal preparation for supervising staff, managing budgets, or navigating organizational politics. Management quality in higher education must therefore be understood not only as individual capability, but as institutional design. Weak management is often a systems problem. Inadequate onboarding for new supervisors, absence of feedback mechanisms, misaligned incentive structures that reward individual contribution over team development, and cultural norms that treat management as administrative overhead rather than strategic work. Kezar and Halcombe, 2017. Strong management, conversely, emerges when institutions invest deliberately in leadership development infrastructure, create transparent performance expectations, and integrate management capability into talent strategy. Prevalence, drivers, and state of practice. Data on management quality in higher education remain fragmented, but available evidence suggests significant variability both within and across institutions. The College and University Professional Association for Human Resources, CUPE-HR, reports that approximately 60% of higher education staff employees cite relationship with direct supervisor as a top factor influencing job satisfaction, yet fewer than half of institutions provide structured training for new managers. CUPE-HR, 2021. A separate study of mid-level administrators found that only 38% received formal leadership development within their first year of assuming supervisory responsibility, and most described their transition to management as trial by fire. Marshall et al., 2016. Several structural factors contribute to this gap. First, higher education institutions historically operated with relatively stable workforces and predictable career ladders. Management skill could be acquired gradually through observation and incremental responsibility. Birnbaum, 1988. That model has eroded. Contemporary higher education demands rapid adaptation, cross functional collaboration, and the ability to lead through ambiguity, capabilities that do not emerge passively. Second, resource constraints have led many institutions to reduce investment in professional development, treating it as discretionary rather than essential. June, 2016. Third, decentralized governance structures and siloed reporting lines fragment accountability for management quality. No single office owns the mandate to ensure supervisors across the institution meet consistent standards. The consequences of weak management are becoming more visible. Exit interview data consistently show that employees leave managers, not institutions, and that dissatisfaction with supervision predicts turnover more reliably than dissatisfaction with compensation or workload. Johnsrud and Rosser, 2002. Engagement surveys reveal persistent gaps between executive leadership perceptions of institutional culture and frontline staff experiences, gaps often mediated by middle management. Modern Think, 2020. For institutions navigating enrollment declines, financial pressures, and the need to reimagine service delivery models, management quality is not peripheral. It is foundational to adaptive capacity. Organizational and individual consequences of management quality. Organizational performance impacts. Management quality affects institutional performance through multiple pathways. First, strong managers improve execution velocity. They translate strategic priorities into actionable work, remove barriers, allocate resources effectively, and maintain accountability without micromanagement. Hoffman et al., 2022. In higher education, where strategic initiatives often stall in the implementation phase, this capability directly determines whether investments in new programs, technology platforms, or process improvements yield returns. Research on project implementation in universities found that initiatives led by managers with high coaching and alignment scores were 2.3 times more likely to meet objectives on time and within budget than those led by managers with weaker capability. Scott et al., 2008. Second, management quality shapes knowledge retention and transfer. High-performing managers actively document processes, mentor successors, and create learning environments where institutional knowledge is shared rather than hoarded. DeLong, 2004. In smaller institutions with limited redundancy, loss of a single high-capacity manager can disrupt operations for months. Conversely, strong managers build teams with distributed expertise, reducing single point of failure risks. A study of administrative continuity in liberal arts colleges found that departments led by development oriented managers experienced 40% shorter recovery periods following leadership transitions than those led by managers who operated as sole decision makers. Eckel and Kezar, 2003. Third, management quality influences employee discretionary effort, the willingness to go beyond minimum requirements. Backer and Demerauti, 2007. In knowledge intensive environments like higher education, discretionary effort determines whether staff proactively solve problems, share innovative ideas, or remain passively compliant. Research demonstrates that employees who perceive their managers as supportive, fair, and development focused report significantly higher engagement and are more likely to contribute ideas that improve processes or services. Truss et al., 2013. For institutions seeking to foster cultures of innovation and continuous improvement, management quality operates as a prerequisite condition. Finally, management quality affects talent attraction and internal mobility. Institutions known for strong leadership development attract candidates seeking career growth, not just employment. Internal mobility, the ability to move laterally across departments or campuses, builds cross functional fluency and reduces the move out to move up dynamic that depletes institutional leadership pipelines. Bitchell, 2023. Longitudinal data show that employees reporting to high performing managers experience 35% more internal mobility over 5 years than peers with weaker managers, even after controlling for performance ratings and educational attainment. Hoffman et al., 2022. For multi campus systems or institutions seeking to diversify leadership representation, intentional management development becomes a lever for equity and succession planning. Individual well being and career trajectory impacts. The consequences of management quality for individual employees are equally significant. Research consistently demonstrates that manager behavior is the strongest predictor of employee well being, surpassing workload, compensation, and organizational culture. Harder et al., 2020. Employees with supportive managers report lower burnout, higher job satisfaction, and greater sense of purpose in their work. Backer and Demerauti, 2007. In higher education, where many staff roles involve emotionally demanding work, crisis response in student affairs, donor relationship management in advancement, equity focused programming in diversity offices, management quality directly affects whether employees sustain commitment or experience depletion. The salary progression and mobility effects documented by Hoffman et al. 2022 reveal structural inequality embedded in management quality variation. Over a 7-year period, employees reporting to top quartile managers experienced median salary growth of 28%, compared to 16% for those reporting to bottom quartile managers. The gap widened over time. Employees with strong managers received promotions an average of 14 months earlier than peers with weak managers, creating compounding advantages in earning potential and career options. For early career professionals, manager quality during the first 3 years of employment predicted long term career trajectory more powerfully than educational credentials or initial job placement. These patterns have equity implications. Women and employees of color are disproportionately likely to report to weak managers, partly because they are underrepresented in senior roles and partly because bias shapes manager assignment and evaluation. Catalyst, 2020. When management quality determines who advances and who stalls, disparities in manager effectiveness reproduce demographic stratification in leadership pipelines. Institutions committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion cannot address representation gaps without simultaneously addressing variation in management capability. Evidence based organizational responses. Structured management development pathways. The most direct intervention to improve management quality is structured development for supervisors at all levels. Effective programs combine foundational skill building, feedback delivery, performance management, conflict navigation, team dynamics with context specific application, navigating shared governance, managing through budget constraints, leading cross functional projects. Research shows that standalone training workshops produce minimal behavior change. Sustainable improvement requires ongoing coaching, peer learning communities, and accountability mechanisms that embed new practices into daily work. Avolio et al., 2009. Several evidence informed approaches have demonstrated effectiveness. Cohort-based leadership academies, multi-month programs that bring managers together across departments to learn core competencies, share challenges, and build cross-institutional networks. Kezar and Halkum, 2017. Manager onboarding protocols. Structured 90-day transitions for new supervisors that include explicit expectations, access to mentors, and early feedback cycles to surface and address skill gaps before they calcify. Bauer, 2010. Action learning projects. Development programs that require managers to apply new skills to real institutional challenges, creating immediate value while reinforcing learning. Marquardt, 2004. Peer coaching circles. Small groups of managers who meet regularly to discuss specific leadership dilemmas, provide feedback, and hold one another accountable for behavior change. Parker et al., 2008. Arizona State University developed a comprehensive leadership development ecosystem that includes role specific academies for emerging, mid level, and senior leaders, a centralized coaching pool, and integration of leadership competencies into performance evaluation criteria. The initiative emerged from recognition that ASU's rapid growth and transformation required leadership capability at scale, not just among executives. By 2020, over 1,200 managers had completed structured development programs, and employee engagement scores for My Supervisor Supports My Development increased by 18 percentage points. Arizona State University, 2020. Critically, ASU tied participation in leadership development to advancement eligibility, signaling that management capability was not optional but expected. Transparent performance feedback ecosystems. Management quality cannot improve without feedback. Yet many higher education institutions lack systematic mechanisms for employees to evaluate supervisors, and when feedback is collected, it rarely informs development or accountability. Gigliotti and Rubin, 2017. Evidence-based feedback ecosystems create regular, multi-directional input loops that surface patterns, celebrate effective practices, and identify managers requiring support. Key design features include 360-degree assessments, structured tools that gather feedback from direct reports, peers, and supervisors, providing managers with comprehensive insight into how their behavior is experienced. Bracken et al., 2016. Anonymous pulse surveys, short, frequent check-ins that track team climate and manager effectiveness in real time, enabling early intervention when issues emerge. Kramer and Ittner, 2020. Stay interviews, structured conversations between managers and high-performing employees to understand what keeps them engaged and what might prompt departure. Surfacing management practices that support retention. Klotz and Bellino, 2016. Skip-level meetings. Regular conversations between employees and their manager to ensure accountability, and provide alternative channels for feedback. Buckingham and Goodall, 2019. University of Michigan implemented an annual Leadership Pulse survey that asks all staff to rate their immediate supervisor on 8 core behaviors: clear communication, developmental feedback, equitable treatment, strategic alignment, recognition, resource support, psychological safety, and accountability. Results are aggregated at the manager level and shared with supervisors alongside institutional benchmarks and personalized development recommendations. Managers scoring below threshold on 2 or more dimensions receive mandatory coaching. Those consistently in the top quartile are recognized and invited to mentor peers. Within 3 years of implementation, the percentage of employees reporting, "My manager actively supports my career development," increased from 52% to 71%, and voluntary turnover among high-performing staff declined by 22%. University of Michigan, 2019. Capability building through coaching and mentorship. Formal training provides foundational knowledge, but sustained behavior change requires ongoing support. Coaching, whether delivered by internal experts, external professionals, or trained peer coaches, creates space for managers to reflect on their practice, experiment with new approaches, and receive personalized guidance. Jones et al., 2016. Research demonstrates that managers who receive regular coaching show significantly greater improvement in leadership effectiveness, employee engagement, and team performance than those who rely on training alone. Thieboom et al., 2014. Effective coaching programs in higher education incorporate role-specific coaching cohorts, grouping managers with similar responsibilities e.g., department chairs, student affairs directors, advancement officers, to address shared challenges and build relevant expertise. G. Melch and Buller, 2015. Just-in-time coaching, short-term, targeted support during critical transitions, new role, team restructuring, performance management situations, to prevent common missteps. Ting and Cisco, 2006. Manager as coach training, teaching supervisors to adopt coaching mindsets with their direct reports, distributing developmental capacity throughout the organization. Stober and Grant, 2006. Executive coaching for senior leaders. Intensive, individualized support for leaders whose decisions shape institutional culture and management expectations. Ketz de Vries et al., 2007. Vanderbilt University established an internal coaching service staffed by HR professionals trained in evidence-based coaching methodologies. The service is available to all managers and operates on a confidential, voluntary basis. Usage data show that managers who engage coaches for at least 3 sessions report higher confidence in handling difficult conversations, giving developmental feedback, and navigating organizational change. Employee engagement scores for teams led by coached managers increased by 12 percentage points relative to comparison groups, and managers who received coaching were significantly more likely to promote team members internally. Vanderbilt University, 2021. Structural operating model interventions. Management quality is not solely a function of individual capability. It reflects structural conditions that either enable or constrain effective leadership. Institutions can redesign operating models to reduce barriers, clarify accountability, and create environments where strong management can flourish. High-impact structural interventions include span of control optimization, ensuring managers supervise neither too few employees, underutilizing leadership capacity, nor too many, preventing meaningful development relationships. Research suggests optimal spans range from 5 to 9 direct reports for knowledge work. Meyer and Boat, 2000. Dual career pathways, creating advancement opportunities that do not require supervisory responsibility, allowing technical experts to progress without managing when they lack interest or aptitude. Baruch and Hall, 2004. Leadership role clarity, explicitly defining what managers are responsible for versus what remains with faculty governance, executive leadership, or shared decision-making bodies, reducing role ambiguity. Kezar and Lester, 2009. Decentralized authority with centralized support, empowering frontline managers to make hiring, budget, and process decisions while providing centralized expertise, HR, finance, IT, to guide those decisions. Cotter, 2014. Georgia Institute of Technology restructured administrative units to ensure all managers had sufficient authority to address team needs without navigating excessive approval layers. The reorganization included consolidating small teams under shared leadership, redistributing supervisory load to create more uniform spans of control, and delegating hiring and budget authority to directors who completed financial stewardship training. Post-implementation surveys showed that managers felt significantly more empowered to support their teams, and decision cycle times for routine personnel and procurement actions decreased by 35%. Georgia Institute of Technology, 2018. Financial and recognition-based supports. Management quality requires investment, both in developing managers and in recognizing their contributions. Many institutions inadvertently signal that management is secondary work by compensating individual contributors and managers similarly, providing no stipend for supervisory responsibility, or promoting high performers into management roles without commensurate salary adjustment. Johnsrud and Rosser, 2002. Evidence-based financial and recognition strategies include management stipends or differentials, providing additional compensation for supervisory responsibility, scaled to span of control and complexity. Monks and Robinson, 2000. Leadership Excellence Awards, recognizing managers whose teams demonstrate high engagement, strong development outcomes, and inclusive cultures, making management quality visible and valued. Ambrose and Kulik, 1999. Retention incentives for high-performing managers, offering targeted salary adjustments or professional development funds to prevent departure of managers whose teams consistently outperform benchmarks. Trevor et al., 1997. Promotion criteria that reward management capability, Ensuring advancement to senior roles requires demonstrated excellence in developing people, not just individual technical achievement. Fernandez et al., 2010. Northeastern University introduced a Leadership Impact Award that annually recognizes 10 managers whose teams show exceptional engagement, development, and retention metrics. Winners receive professional development stipends, are profiled in internal communications, and are invited to present their practices at institutional leadership forums. The award created visibility for management excellence and motivated mid level leaders to prioritize team development. Within 2 years, internal promotion rates for employees reporting to award winning managers increased by 19%, and voluntary turnover in those units declined to less than half the institutional average. Northeastern University, 2022. Building long term management capability and institutional resilience. Embedding management quality into institutional strategy. For management capability to become genuine infrastructure rather than episodic initiative, it must be integrated into institutional strategy and governance. This requires board level accountability for leadership development metrics, presidential commitment to talent strategy as strategic priority, and cross functional ownership that distributes responsibility beyond human resources. High performing institutions increasingly adopt practices such as leadership dashboards, regular reporting to governing boards on management quality indicators, engagement scores, internal mobility rates, leadership pipeline diversity, retention of high potential employees, alongside traditional financial and enrollment metrics. Kaplan and Norton, 2001. Talent review processes. Structured annual assessments where senior leaders evaluate management capability across the institution, identify high potential leaders, and commit resources to develop successors. Berger and Berger, 2017. Management capability as strategic pillar. Naming leadership development explicitly in strategic plans, with measurable goals, accountability assignments, and resource allocations. Doris et al., 2004. Integration with diversity and inclusion goals. Linking management development to representation targets, ensuring that leadership pipelines reflect institutional equity commitments. Williams and Wade Golden, 2013. Distributed leadership development ecosystems. Traditional models concentrate leadership development in executive ranks or limit participation to designated high potentials. Evidence suggests that institutions perform better when leadership capability is distributed broadly, creating bench strength at all levels and reducing single point of failure risks. Grahn, 2002. Distributed leadership development treats supervision as a core competency required of all managers, not an elite skill reserved for senior roles. Strategies to distribute leadership capability include universal manager onboarding, requiring all new supervisors, regardless of level, to complete foundational development before assuming responsibility. Day et al., 2014. Peer learning networks, creating cross-departmental communities where managers share practices, troubleshoot challenges, and co-develop solutions. Wenger, 1998. Embedded development in team meetings, building skill practice into regular team rhythms, e.g., rotating meeting facilitation, structured feedback exchanges, reflective debriefs, rather than isolating development in off-site workshops. Edmondson, 2012. Leadership rotations and stretch assignments, enabling managers to lead cross-functional projects, serve on institutional committees, or take temporary assignments outside their home units to broaden perspective and build networks. McCall, 2010. Purpose, belonging, and psychological contract recalibration. Management quality ultimately rests on the psychological contract, the unwritten expectations employees and institutions hold about their mutual obligations. Rousseau, 1995. In higher education, these contracts have shifted dramatically. Employees once expected stable employment, gradual advancement, and institutional loyalty in exchange for commitment and flexibility. Contemporary realities, financial instability, restructuring, outsourcing, have eroded those expectations, requiring institutions to renegotiate the employment relationship around new terms. Kezar and Sam, 2010. High-performing managers help recalibrate psychological contracts by communicating realistic expectations, being transparent about institutional constraints, advancement timelines, and areas where flexibility is genuinely limited. Kassar and Meyer, 2018. creating meaningful work, connecting daily tasks to mission, enabling employees to see how their contributions matter. Dick and Duffy, 2009. Building belonging, fostering inclusive team cultures where employees feel psychologically safe, valued, and connected to colleagues. Walton and Cohen, 2011. Supporting agency and autonomy, providing employees choice in how they accomplish work, opportunities to shape priorities, and voice in decisions affecting their roles. Desai and Ryan, 2000. When managers successfully recalibrate psychological contracts, employees remain committed despite external pressures. Institutions that equip managers to navigate this recalibration position themselves to retain talent, sustain engagement, and adapt strategically. Conclusion. Management quality operates as hidden infrastructure in higher education, foundational to institutional performance, yet often taken for granted until it fails. The evidence is unambiguous. Employees reporting to high-performing managers experience measurably better outcomes over time, advancing faster, moving more fluidly across organizational boundaries, and remaining engaged longer than peers with weaker managers. For institutions navigating enrollment volatility, financial constraints, and the imperative to reimagine service delivery, management capability is not peripheral. It is a strategic lever institutions can fully control. The path forward requires deliberate investment and structural change. Institutions must move beyond treating management as an assumed competency and build systematic development infrastructure. Structured pathways for new supervisors, transparent feedback ecosystems, coaching and mentorship supports, operating model interventions that clarify authority and reduce barriers, and recognition systems that reward leadership excellence. These interventions must be embedded in institutional strategy, distributed across all management levels, and sustained through cycles of budget pressure and competing priorities. Ultimately, strong management creates compounding advantages. High-quality managers translate strategy into execution, retain institutional knowledge through transitions, inspire discretionary effort, and develop the next generation of leaders. Over time, these dynamics differentiate institutions that adapt successfully from those that stagnate. In a sector where margin for error continues to shrink, investing in management quality is not discretionary. It is essential infrastructure for institutional resilience and mission fulfillment.